Aloha and welcome to Thumbing Through Yesterday, the podcast where we take our favorite books from the shelves, blow the dust off them, and remind ourselves why it is we love them so. My name's Tom Galley, and with me today we've got Tony Pasculi.
Thanks, Tom.
And today we are talking about one of my favorites, a C.S. Forester book, The Good Shepherd, the basis for the Apple TV movie Greyhound.
Yeah, so have you read other C.S. Forester? This is a name that was unfamiliar to me, but it's obviously a genre I know.
Yeah, actually, it turns out I have not. This is the only of his books that I have read, but I'm a huge fan of the BBC production of the Horatio Hornblower movies. Those are his writings.
Okay.
And there was another one, the African Queen.
African Queen
is his
yes.
as well. And there's a number of others. Apparently, he does write a whole bunch of stuff about naval encounters, but, you know.
I have to admit that I'm not familiar with Horatio Hornblower either, other than as a pop culture trope. An old school pop culture trope. Yeah, I've never read it or seen any Horatio Hornblower. In fact, I think my only reference would be, isn't he made fun of in the Marx Brothers
He may
movies?
well be.
Yeah, so.
Well, we own on the two DVD collections of the first series of movies and the second series of movies, and it's the sort of thing we go back and rewatch every few years. It's delightful movie making, and I can't help but think it would be fantastic reading also.
All right. So, and then before we get into this, I have to ask, you've seen Greyhound, obviously.
I have seen Greyhound.
Okay.
It was new on Apple TV during a very brief window when I had a free month of Apple TV. And I enjoyed that thoroughly as well.
All right. Good. I saw it. I meant to rewatch it after reading the book, and I didn't have time to do that. But, I enjoyed it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed the book, too. So why is this a favorite?
It is such a non-stop, action-packed. The thing's only 3 chapters long, but that is completely misleading because most of the book is chapter 2, which covers 50 hours, a consecutive 50 hours, which is non-stop combat. It's non-stop hunt and seek. It's non-stop logistics and mathematics, and it makes mathematics exciting. I kind of the problem I have with this book, I tend to read late at night when I lay down to bed, and of course I was reading it over the holidays, so I was going to bed late. And once I pick it up, it's almost impossible to put down. It's like I'll just read until the next duty watch. The next duty watch, the submarine is in the convoy somewhere. They have to go after it. I can't stop reading now. So it's somewhere around 2 a.m. my eyes are too blurry to continue, and I set it aside. And that's the state in which I read it, which kind of emulates the state that Captain Krauss is in.
Interesting. I didn't, obviously it's nonstop. There's nonstop naval warfare happening. I didn't perceive it as action because
action is the wrong word. Tension, nonstop tension.
It's nonstop tension, but it feels like to me, it just felt like really even tension as opposed to a lot of ups and downs like a roller coaster. So it was less thrilling for me in that way. It was interesting. It was fascinating. And I do love the way these guys do the math calculations in their head and then very quickly and then back it up, with pencil and paper if and when they have time. I love that kind of facility with math and there was the description of the battles was obviously incredible and intense but God, the tension level just goes up to like 9 and then stays there.
It does stay there. It stays there nonstop for 50 hours.
Yeah.
And there's so many things going on in this. His exhaustion.
Yes.
He comes on duty after 3 hours of sleep.
Yes.
3 good hours of sleep. He's chastising himself for being tired because he had 3 good hours of sleep, and then he's on for 50 hours of nonstop tension, if not action.
Yeah.
But that exhaustion, and then the things that he is just automatically thinking of, which never ever would have occurred, maybe not ever, but it would not have occurred to me. Everyone likes to think themselves, I'd be a good captain of a starship, I'd be a good captain of a sailing ship, whatever, I want to be in charge,
I would never think that.
But stuff like, he has, what is it, a convoy of 37 ships, and he is in charge of the 4 combat vessels that are defending them. 4 combat vessels to defend 37 unarmed merchant vehicles as they cross the ocean from America to Great Britain. And he has to think about things like they've had a contact. There is a German submarine behind the convoy.
Yeah.
Do I send a ship back to deal with that? They're not going to be able to sink it. There's almost no chance they'll be able to sink it, but they'll be able to force it underwater. They'll be able to make it farther from the convoy. But if I do that, for every 15 minutes that ship is pointed away from the convoy, it's going to take an hour for that ship to catch back up to the convoy.
Yeah. And then you've got 3 ships protecting your
If it
convoy.
runs at full speed.
Yeah.
Burning as much fuel as it can possibly burn. Will it have enough fuel to get back? Will it be back in time? Will the 3 ships I have be enough to protect us against the next threat? And then other just, mundane stuff. How many depth charges are on a destroyer? Well, the answer was, 34 or something like that?
Not enough, as it turns out.
Yeah, I mean, you watch the World War II movies, and, they're just lobbing depth charges willy-nilly, nonstop. Yeah, 34, and they're launching them 4 at a time. That's 8 full patterns in a couple.
Yeah.
My number might be a little bit off, but it's not radically off. It was fewer than 40 depth charges,
I remember
and he was the big ship.
I was thinking about that as he's just like firing off, just like and like how many depth charges do these ships carry? Not that many, it turns out. And he's not. It's the one thing where he's not automatically doing the mental math. He gets surprised by the report. It's like, oh, we can't do a full pattern next time because we don't have that many depth charges.
Yep.
It's like, oh, crap.
And they're saying, we've brought the extra ones up from the men's quarters. They were storing extra ordnance in sleeping quarters, which I don't guess is too surprising. I mean, there's a finite amount of space, but yeah, it's just nuts to me. And he's constantly doing this background math in his head about things I wouldn't think about doing math and about things I would, relative bearing of that target, probable speed of that target, where do I need to point my ship to intercept what's likely to be a German sub, unless it's nothing. Yeah, I mean, just what a video game that would make,
It would be a very tense video game.
It would be a very tense video game.
I don't think I would enjoy it.
Playing it for 50 hours straight, yeah.
So the thing that struck me about this book, because it's been, I used to read a lot of books like this when I was a kid. My mom had a whole shelf of British adventure novels, many of them based on true stories, like not The Great Escape, but the same prison compound where The Great Escape took place, there was another escape, also a real story, where some guys got out by asking permission to build a vaulting horse so they could stay fit.
Uh-huh.
And they did that to defeat the seismic detection of the digging under the horse. They would carry a dude out in this horse, and he would dig, and they would vault. And then they dug a tunnel, and 3 guys got out that way. And that was the same concentration camp as The Great Escape. So I read, tons of books like that. Alistair MacLean, which will pop up on our list at some point, Guns of Navarone, if not something else, Ice Station Zebra.
Forced in Navarone,
Yeah, but it's been a long time since I've read anything like this, and it really struck me how different this is than a contemporary novel. It's very much outward focused. He talks a little bit about his condition, but mostly dismissively. It's like, oh God, I'm so hungry, but I don't have time to eat right now. Mm-hmm. And someone brings him a sandwich, and by the time he has time to look at it, like the coffee is cold, and he drinks it anyway because he needs the caffeine. That kind of thing. But there's no personal story. There's no pregnant wife back home. There's no, by the time we get there, It's just like he's in the moment the entire time dealing with this horrible situation, fairly competently, extremely competently, as it turns out, even though he's racking up losses. And they're just like, that's all you lost? Only 6 ships? Yeah. So.
And there's backstory there, right? We know he was married. We know the marriage didn't work out, and it didn't work out because, in part, he was so driven, so career focused.
But that's not. Yeah, there is mention of it, but it's not. It's not tied into the narrative. It's just something we get a glimpse of here and there. It's not. It's not The Rock, where he's got to save San Francisco because his pregnant girlfriend is in San Francisco.
Right.
It's not that, right?
No, it's definitely not that.
Yeah.
And he's haunted by a couple of things, although he doesn't have a lot of time to be haunted because, like you said, he's nonstop captaining, doing captainy stuff. But he was fitted but retained, and this is something that keeps coming back, and he hates it. Mm-hmm. I had to go and look that up.
Ditto. Because that's not in the glossary, even though it's the most common unusual phrase in this whole book.
This book has a glossary of naval terms, and it doesn't have fitted but retained. So for those of you who read the book but have been too lazy to look it up, fitted means that he has been evaluated and he's good enough for his current job. He fits the job requirements. Retained means he has not been promoted.
Yes.
And that could be, just general internet research, that could be because there were no job openings, right? There's a finite number of captains up there. Or it could be because he's just not amazing, right? He's a fine captain. He's good at what he's doing, but there's no reason to think he'd do better higher up. Yeah. And then they're joined by that word, but. Fitted, but retained. And he just feels, a slight. And he's constantly worried, well, maybe not constantly, but frequently he worries about whether or not the other ships are going to respect him, whether or not they're going to follow his orders. Because 2 of the ships have been doing sub-hunts for years.
Yeah.
And he's not. He hasn't. This is his first actual combat mission.
Yeah. He does worry about that a bit. And he worries about, because he's an American and it's, they're not, this is an Allied convoy. Is he going to make a good impression on the Allies? Yeah. Or is he just going to they're going to be like, oh, freaking Americans, man. Yeah. So is he going to let the side down? Yeah. But there's not a lot of that. It's mostly computing trajectories, estimating fuel, picking targets. Speaking to his other officers and crew. Yeah.
Yep.
One of the things that really stood out for me was this: somebody gets excited they got a sub in their sights, and just yells, "Oh no, they're shooting at them! Torpedoes approaching!" said the talker. "Make your report the way you've been taught," snapped Krause at the talker. "Repeat." Torpedoes are coming at him, and he has to take this moment to say it correctly. Yeah.
Do your job the way you were taught to do your job.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's a stickler for that. One of the things, even though they're in this high tension periodic combat situation, he's still in the back of his head keeping track of the performance of these officers.
That too. Yeah.
Well, with an eye towards, what is my report going to say? Do I think this person is ready to advance? Do I think this person should be kept in their current job?
Yeah. Someone early on, I didn't make note of this, but someone early on says, "Should we do this?" And immediately he's like, "Oh my God, what a blunder to even ask that question." I can't remember what the question was.
They were going to light, or they were questioning whether they should light another boiler. And whoever brought it to his attention, it wasn't something the captain needed to worry about. It should have gone to the officer of the day or officer.
He should have just
deck.
Decided himself, or something, or passed it on to someone else.
So the fact that this person came to him and pulled his valuable attention away for such a mundane detail, that didn't sit well with him.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he had to deal with a disciplinary action, right? Because they had a crewman who was confined to quarters or in the brig, I don't remember which, for something relatively minor, but it had to be judged. It had to be dealt with. And until the captain dealt with it, you had an able-bodied seaman locked away during a time when you were engaging in combat.
Yeah. It's interesting, the contrast between this and something like Starship Troopers, where he talks about military discipline a lot. But Heinlein sort of just gets into it and gets into the philosophy of it, and he makes it personal. And here's it's all sort of by example. It's like you realize in a situation like this, because he takes the time to correct this guy, how important it must be. You don't want someone just yelling random, because what if it's not the guy on the talker who's yelling torpedoes approaching? What if it's someone else?
Right.
Yeah. And it's a false reporter, they're confused or excited or whatever. So that kind of discipline becomes even more important in combat, but he doesn't bother to explain any of that. He just snaps this order, and you just go, "Oh my God, yeah, of course.
Right.
Yeah. When Heinlein will just dive into it and give you an example and a counterexample and a page of philosophy. Yeah. And I enjoy both approaches, but real contrast there.
Well, that would certainly derail the tension on this one.
Yes, it
would.
But
it's also very different than his personality.
Yes, that too.
Yeah.
That's really striking also. This idea of this very ordinary level of heroism. He's not anything special. Yeah. He's just someone who's been given this job, and he's given this incredible, horrible task, and he's going to perform it to the best of his ability. And it's conditions that no one should be expected to operate in for any work, let alone one where so many lives are at stake. And he just does it without complaining. He does it without getting really surly or anything like that. He doesn't lose his temper or lose his cool. He just, he regrets that he doesn't have time to drink his coffee while it's hot.
Yep.
Yeah.
The slippers I thought were a nice touch. When he comes on duty, he's rushed out of his cabin because there's a contact. So he doesn't get fully dressed, right?
Yes.
So he's in his uniform,
yeah.
but he doesn't put on his cold weather gear and his raincoat or his heavy gloves or whatever. So he's on the bridge. He's in uniform and he appears, properly, but he's underdressed. And they're in combat, and he's going outside into the winter splash zone air to look through binoculars. He's getting wet. He's getting wind chilled. And he's holding himself to this standard. An officer should be this, an officer should be that. So he refuses to sit down. He refuses to make any concession to his own physical well-being.
He refuses to sit down. I think there's one point where the lights go out and it's dark, and he thinks, I could sit for a moment. And it's like, well, what if the lights came on and they saw me sitting?
Yep.
Yeah.
And he drives himself like that for 24 hours or more.
Yeah, on his feet, nonstop.
On his feet.
Yeah.
And, eventually, this he's not eating, he's not drinking. I didn't actually count, but I think he left the bridge to go to the head maybe 4 times total in 50 hours.
Yeah.
I do that in, much less time. But at some point, he starts to break down. So he sends someone to his cabin for his coat, which is fine, right? Mm-hmm. He should be wearing his coat and his gloves. And then he sends someone to the cabin for his slippers because his feet are just killing him. His legs are killing him. So he's going to put on his comfy slippers. And then he allows himself to sit down for a bit. And he literally falls asleep sitting there for a moment, for a second. And then he won't let himself sit again, right? So he stands back up until his legs go numb from the pain. And he's still this exhausted in his head. He's still doing all these things. He's keeping track of where the U-boats are, their likely direction. He's keeping track of his convoy, his defense ships, how much fuel he's got, how much armament he's got.
Yeah. So a couple of the things that really struck me, just 2 little throwaway things. They mentioned his physical description. He is 5'9" and 155 pounds.
I totally missed that. He's a little shrimp of a guy.
He's rail thin. 150. I have not been 155 pounds since high school. I'm 5'9". I've been 155 since high school. Yeah. When I'm at my fittest, absolute, ab showing, I'm 165. Yeah. So he just casually tosses it off. It's just like, this is a very average sort of height and weight for a person to be. It's like, God damn, that is rail thin, buddy.
Yep.
Yeah. And then the other thing that really struck me is they're talking about one of the crew. I forget which one of the crew it is. Boy was one of the new draft, fresh out of boot camp. He had 2 years of high school to his credit. So at least he had the educational requirements for his station. 2 years of high school is all this kid had to be on a warship. Yeah, that's insane.
Finished his sophomore year and went to war.
Yeah. Incredible. Certainly one thing this reinforces is, in spite of the challenges of our modern era, COVID and other things, it is nothing. It is nothing compared to what these people went through in World War II. Yeah. So, very grateful to be living in 2024 and not, 1944.
It's actually 2025. But...
Oh, it is 2025. It is 2025.
It is early in January as we're recording this.
It's even more 2025 by the time this episode drops.
Yeah. Yep.
So
what about the scripture? This is a religious man, a devout man. And his last action before he throws himself on his bed is to get on his knees to pray. And at the start of many of these, not every shift, but many of these shifts, Forrester gives us a Bible verse or an excerpt from the Bible that's going through the captain's head, but it is woven into the events of the moment really nicely. I'm not a Bible scholar or aficionado, as a-religious as the next person, but I thought it was really lovely the way that he would do that, would just slip a little bit of Bible verse in there as part of the captain's thoughts. But it wasn't artificial. It wasn't contrived. It just meshed perfectly with whatever he was thinking about. If he was thinking about the speed of a German U-boat, somehow there was a Bible verse that was relevant to the speed of a German U-boat.
Ah, okay. Yeah. Yesterday and today and forever, he said to himself, as he always did when he had passed his own inspection. That was a passage from Hebrews 13. It marked the fact that he was starting out on a fresh stage of his journey through the temporary world to the grave and to immortality beyond it. Yeah. I mean, that's, yeah. I didn't really notice that. That didn't, I grew up, did you grow up religious?
I was in a Baptist household. We went to church every Sunday. I went to Sunday school.
I would say so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up Catholic, and so this was the environment I was raised in. But I'm not now. It's not weird to me that someone would be that. It's become less common, but it's not weird to me that someone would, especially in a situation like this, rely on their faith and their religious upbringing to get through a difficult situation. That makes a lot of sense, and I think that sort of it's a contributing factor, that sort of moral clarity and in terms of him having to set a good example of having to do the difficult thing regardless of the personal cost.
Yep.
That's a very difficult thing for people to do today, and I think that's a reason why, if you have a strong religious upbringing, there are good and bad things about religion for sure, but that's, I think, one advantage it gives you is just that clarity of purpose. Yeah.
Yep.
So
and he is cognizant of the fact that what he is trying to do is kill about 50 Germans at any given time. He doesn't hesitate, he doesn't blink, he doesn't flinch from it, but he is completely aware that if he succeeds in stopping the U-boat attack, it's because he has killed about 50 people.
Not just killed them, but sent them to a horrible death.
Yep.
Yeah, he remarks on that specifically, that it's not a good way to die in a U-boat that's imploding underwater. Yeah.
Yep. So it just grips me. This book, for whatever reason, I start turning the pages. I get into chapter 2, and then it's almost impossible to put down. And again, chapter 2 is probably 85% of the book.
Yeah.
We have the chapter that gets him into the conflict, and we have the chapter after they have survived the crossing, which is really quite short. Not much happens.
Yeah. Yeah. It was good. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. I didn't find it as gripping, because I wanted actually more of that narrative, and it was very, very heavy on the details and the mechanics, which I enjoy, but I enjoy a bigger mix of narrative, I guess. But I would like to read African Queen, because that was a remarkable movie, and it's so different than this.
Mm-hmm.
And I would kind of like to see what how he writes that story. Yeah.
Well, I definitely think I'm going to pick up some more Forster. I did not realize how much of his work I'd been exposed to in the form of, film and TV stuff. So, since this is the one Forster, and I've read this, I didn't discover this book that long ago. Probably less than 10 years ago I came across it.
Oh, interesting.
And I think this is my fourth read since then, maybe my fifth since then.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. But again, it goes just so quickly because I can't put the silly thing down.
Yeah. That's quite a read rate, though. That's like every couple of years you pull it out again. That's a good sign.
Yep.
Yeah, because we've certainly done some books on here where it's like, oh yeah, I remember reading this when I was 13.
Wow, what was I thinking?
Yeah. The ones that always are the best for me are the ones where it's every 10 years or so. It's like, oh my God, I can read this again. I can't wait. Yeah. So that's great. Yeah, always good to make a new favorite. 10 years old. Yeah. Oh, I don't know much about submarines, but it's interesting that they have to come to the surface to attack. And I don't think that's true of modern submarines.
The World War II era, they didn't have to surface, but they had to be periscope depth to do it with any accuracy.
Periscope depth, that's what it is, because they need visual. Even though they've got sonar, they still need visual.
The sonar of the day was
pretty bad.
There's something in that direction.
Yeah.
And unless it was awfully close, you couldn't tell which way, if it was coming or going. You couldn't tell anything about, other than there's something in that direction.
All right. So periscope depth is the big defining thing there.
Which is 30-ish feet, for the subs of the era.
Yeah. And then the other thing was that if they surfaced, they could make better time than if they were under the water.
Yep.
Which is also striking to me.
Yep.
Yeah. That seems like he would be I don't know, maybe my intuition is failing me here. It seems like at the boundary of two surfaces, you would be slower.
When you're on the surface, when the submarines are on the surface, they can run their diesel engines.
Oh, is that what it is?
When they submerge, the diesels get shut off and they run off of batteries on electric engines. So the only maneuvering power they've got is batteries. And again, batteries of the time, they weren't lithium ion,
No. Yeah. All right.
The Germans played around with, they came up with the idea of the Schnorkel, which, along the periscope, they actually ran an air tube up to the surface so that at periscope depth, they could run the diesel engines. But you're in a tin can with, hundreds of horsepowers of diesel engine and no way to vent the heat, if nothing else. So service in there, I have done the tours of the Bowfin submarine so many times.
Really? Okay.
But service inside the engine compartment, you could be at 130, 140 degrees as a working temperature constantly. Wow. And once you close the hatches and you can't ventilate anymore, that spreads to the entire sub. So
the Bowfin's, so we're recording this in Honolulu, and the Bowfin's a submarine down in Pearl Harbor that you can board. And I've never been on it. That's a World War II era sub?
Yep.
Okay. It runs on diesel and batteries?
Diesel and batteries.
Okay. When do we get nuclear?
Not yet.
Later. That happened later. Okay.
Later.
All right.
But man, the things they would do in those. So I mean, if you get a chance to take the tour, it's an ordeal, right? Going down into that area. But one of the things is there is no point where even somebody 5'9" can stand up comfortably.
Oh my God.
And very few points where you can stand facing forward without your shoulders brushing something on either side. It is a tiny space. You're going to put 50 people in that thing.
Yeah.
And then they would sail it. The Bowfin went into the Tokyo Bay. They actually took it off the coast of Japan into Tokyo Bay proper. It's a diesel boat. They put 4 or 5 of them in there. The Bowfin was one of a small invasion force that they sent in there. And when time came to escape, now this is early days of radar, right? This wouldn't work today. But their strategy was when they had all done the damage they could do, or they just barely had enough fuel to get out, they waited until it was night. They surfaced and they ran as fast as they could for the open ocean.
Wow.
Not so much tactics. It's just, please God, don't let them see us,
Yeah. I was reading a little bit about the early history of submarines because I didn't remember when the first submarine. This was, I think, World War II was the first time they were really used, and they were a huge threat to Allied shipping, and that contributed a lot to. There's a lot of esprit de corps among the sub crews. I think they mentioned it in this book that they were doing so much damage that they were proud to be. They could suffer these incredibly awful conditions because they were making such great progress for the war effort on the German side. Yeah. But the earliest submarines go back, like, I want to say before the Civil War.
The first combat mission of a submarine was in the Civil War. It was the Hunley, the Confederate submarine Hunley, which sank a ship and itself sank on the mission. Yep.
There was a guy who was trying to make the first submarine, and he made one, and he got some people to try it out, and it sank, killing the entire crew. And so he made another one, and it sank, killing the entire crew. And he made another one, which sank, killing the entire crew. And then he made a fourth one, which he piloted himself, which sank, killing the entire crew. But that one apparently worked long enough that they thought, okay, it'll work. And they
proof of concept. Proof of concept. I think, I'm going to be wrong on this, I think the Hunley, when they first sent it out on a training mission, I think it sank and killed everyone, and they pulled it back up.
Okay, it might be the same one I'm thinking of, yeah.
It didn't kill everyone that time, so they actually used it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, again, I don't remember how I got introduced to this book. I have a friend. I've got a couple of friends who have been submariners at various points in their life. But I have one who's an avid reader, and it may well be that he recommended this to me, and that's how I got hooked up with it. But yeah, if you haven't read any Forster, I think this is a fantastic. This is the only one I've read, so I think this is a fantastic place to start. I'm definitely going to make it a point to read some more, though.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. All right. So what's up next then?
Up next, we have a complete change of direction. We are reading The Anubis Gates, fantasy by Tim Powers.
I am not familiar with this. Looking forward to it.
Me too.
All right. Well, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
See you in 2 weeks.